This is
Podcast Raleigh
with your hosts,
Ashton and Hayes.
I think Raleigh does an incredible job. I mean, you think about things like Hopscotch and the Bluegrass Festival and, the African American Cultural Festival. And we do great things here. We have, the opera and the symphony. We have it all.
Welcome into Podcast Raleigh. In this episode, we talk to Jenn McEwen, President and CEO of the United Arts Council of Raleigh and Wake County. We talk to her about the United Arts Council's events and programs, including its strong artist in residence programs in Wake County schools. And we hear how she transformed her love of arts and performing into a career of supporting artists and performers and uplifting the community through art. Jenn McEwen first became familiar with North Carolina when she attended a summer theater camp at UNC Greensboro that led her to choose UNCG for college. She has worked in the arts ever since, eventually finding her way back to North Carolina as the head of the United Arts Council of Raleigh and Wake County. We talked to her about the Arts Council, including the important topic of making people aware when they're seeing art that it's being supported by the United Arts Council. We also hear about their Big Night Out for the Arts event, their Artist in Residence program, and more. But we started by asking Jenn how she ended up in Raleigh.
I spent some time in college in Greensboro in North Carolina studying music at the UNCG School of Music. And after going to grad school in New Orleans, headed back to Atlanta and spent the bulk of my career there. And then my husband and I did a brief hiatus on Hilton Head Island, where I launched their first government agency for the arts. And thank you, Hilton Head, for being a beautiful place to suffer a pandemic. But when we got on the other side of it, we realized it wasn't quite reality for raising our kids. So we made our short list. It was 3 places of where we were going to head to. We were either going to go back to Atlanta, we were going to hop the bridge and just go over to Savannah, where my husband was working, or we had the Triangle. My husband, since we had kids 9 years ago, we've had friends here. We've loved North Carolina, universities, the quality education. So this area's always been on our short list. We were like, all right, well, let's see what happens. And then I randomly was texting with a colleague of mine who lives here in Raleigh, and she was like, hey, there's a job, and you should get it. And so she sent me the link, and here we are.
Well, that worked out really well, didn't it?
Yeah, I know. Timing's everything. From a Sunday breakfast with my husband being like, all right, where are the 3 places we would live? And then 8 weeks later, we're coming here.
Wow, that is really fast.
I'd love to be validated by hearing that you had Raleigh ranked first out of those 3, but it sounded like a good job.
The opportunity definitely was going to be prioritized.
I will say we need to go back and do the data keeping of number of people that came here. I think number 1 is probably job. Mm-hmm. And somewhere
education.
Well, I was saying job first. Coming to school would be another one. Yeah. And then there is some level of, because of the nature of our podcast and who we've interviewed, there's people who are from here, but I think job is probably number 1. All right, I want to jump back. You said you went to college at UNCG.
Yes.
What are your memories of coming to Raleigh during those times?
Yeah. So my very first memory of coming to Raleigh is I was at UNCG, and not being a North Carolinian, especially freshman year, I was there every weekend. And so a girlfriend of mine was like, hey, some of my high school friends are throwing a pig picking for the NC State game. Come on. And we came over and we picked some pigs. So go pack.
Was that your first pig picking experience?
Yes, it was. I didn't really know anything about barbecue till I got to North Carolina. And then I will let everybody on this podcast know that I wore it as a badge of honor, heading to New Orleans for grad school, going back to Atlanta. I was going to stand on some battlefields in South Carolina, but I was like, no, North Carolina barbecue is where it's at.
Are you not just pandering to our podcast?
No, I never pander.
All right, good.
So how did you then, so you weren't from North Carolina, how did you wind your way into UNCG?
Yeah, so UNCG, so I was singing, and I was in Atlanta. My family had just moved down there from Connecticut, and I was looking all over at schools of music, and I was going to grow up to be an opera singer, maybe, or a musical theater star. I was going to go to a summer program at Oberlin, and my mom was like, no, you're not, because that conflicts with our summer vacation in New England. So you can find someplace on the I-85 corridor to do your summer training. And, after some bratty back and forth, I was like, fine, there's a program at UNCG. And I went and I spent a week there, and I took some private lessons with Dr. Nancy Walker. Shout out Dr. Walker. and just like fell in love and came home and was like, that's where I'm going to college.
So
Mine
I feel
was made
like
up.
some people like to, define either their, being a Raleighite or being a North Carolinian by like number of years. But I feel like we need to take these things on a case by case basis, right? And like somebody who like stopped here for the summer and then decided for whatever reason, whether it was the college specifically or North Carolina, was like, I'm staying here. And somebody who appreciates barbecue, I'm like, we don't need your total years of living here.
We can smush them all together and then add the passion on top, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, we accept that.
So you move up here with the job. What are some of the kind of first, well, I guess, how did your impressions of Raleigh when you relocated your family here match to your memories of Raleigh from your times visiting before that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely grown, right? But we immediately we were in love. There was no like conversation about do we, don't we? And my husband is such a good trooper, and like we've looked at places all over the East Coast primarily that we might land in, from Stowe, Vermont, down to Hilton Head Island. And yeah, we got here and he was like, this is it. I'm like, yeah, we're never leaving. So, we just like the kids at first were like, well, it doesn't have a beach. And I'm like, but the beach is like just 2 hours away. It's so good.
Who doesn't have a beach?
Who doesn't have we got a beach. It's like, and we're up in the mountains. We're big hikers. We love being outdoors. So
did your husband have any previous North Carolina connections or experience?
He had been to Greensboro for work, and when he was in Atlanta, and he had followed me there when I was interviewing for a job there in my adulthood. I don't know if he had spent much time in the Triangle actually at all. So we just had done some research and kind of narrowed in. And I'm happy we're in the Wake County, Raleigh vortex of it all. At the time, being far away, we were like, okay, like if we can land anywhere, like somewhere between Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh, it seems like we'll be okay,
Sure.
But no, I think we made the very right decision.
And then, all right, so we often this podcast crosses how you got here and what you do here. How did you get into the arts?
Yeah, great question. So I went to UNC Greensboro, and when I graduated, I was like, oh my God, I do not have the patience to find out if I make it as a professional opera singer when I'm in my mid-30s, blah. So I researched some graduate programs, and I headed off to the University of New Orleans and did my master's in arts management. And I think originally I thought I was going to do that master's of arts program and then maybe parlay it into a JD and kind of go the management side, artist management side. But then I really just kind of got into all of the philosophy and strategy and structure behind running nonprofit arts organizations. And kind of at the time, going to go ahead and age myself, but like that was also like Richard Florida had just published The Rise of the Creative Class, and kind of like digging into a lot of that data just really kind of jazzed me up. So I ended up back in Atlanta, and I fell into theater, into professional theater through marketing and PR. Like I was for sure the girl that could put butts in seats and, go out and get the TV interviews and like somehow land a 4:00 news cover story on a like $1 million nonprofit theater at the 11 o'clock news in Atlanta. Like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. Like, like it was just like, I have no idea why. I was just able to convince people that seeing obscure theater was what they should do.
So do you, I imagine, and well, I know from hearing you talk about your high school and wanting to go to a summer program, you definitely had arts in you at a young age.
Oh yeah. My mom's an artist. My mom's a visual artist and was a public art teacher.
But so like, that's obvious. Do you, now looking back, do you see, like you so eloquently talk about business, it rolls off your tongue and stuff. Like, do you look back and be like, oh, also, I knew I always loved the arts. Can you look back and be like, oh, also, I was a business person? Like, were you a lemonade stand, Girl Scout cookies? Like,
for sure. Actually, I just told my husband this story like a week ago, and so yeah, when I was 10 years old, I actually created a birthday party business where I made some flyers, and I, for $25 American, would throw your child's birthday party at your home for you, and like would show up.
You're going right.
For you, Ashton, it is.
Thank you. I could really use the help.
My husband was like, you did what? I was like, I think I threw like 3 birthday parties. And then I was like, I'm bored with this. But, but I do. My dad very much was like, instead of music, you could go into business. He's the accountant, right? Like the financial advisor.
Seems like a bit of a push-pull between parents.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, but music made me really good at math, right? Like, so
sure.
that's That all
So
goes together.
what do you think it was about like the policy side of arts that was so interesting to you?
A couple things, right? A couple things that one, like so much of this country is founded on European tradition, but then there's also so many things that we like just completely abandoned and, like support of the creative sector in that very organic, municipal way, is not something that we really carried over here in any sort of form of tradition. Even though if you look back at things like silversmithing and, trades work, like that all is part of it. And then I think just like the differences, the differences in how our states respond to it, the differences in how our different corporate communities respond. You look at a place like New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, I would even say Atlanta, and corporations are very much like our people want to live in a place with a thriving arts community. I will make a donation or I will write a corporate check to put Delta Airlines on top of this theater so that people know that we are valuing the arts in this community. If you look at, Coca-Cola has the entire Woodruff Arts Center. And you have, again, Chicago, Minneapolis, places where the mayor came in and said, no, like this is important to not just our economy, but also the emotional and social well-being of our society. So those things I find appealing. I also love taking a lot of those like normal, very like standard corporate models and figuring out how to apply them to the arts. Like when I was at marketing the theater company, we had this one show and it was basically set in a kitchen in a house. And do you guys know the canned food product Glory Foods? Mm-hmm. So Glory Foods was a client of one of my board members. And I was like, oh, can we go talk to them about product placement during this play? She was like, no one's ever talked about product placement in a play. And I'm like, okay, great. But like,
why not?
They can give us $10,000 and we'll put some cans on this shelf and then people will stare at it for 2 hours. And, and great, it worked.
Yeah.
So like that kind of stuff I think is I just think it's interesting to come up with creative ways to support the sector that maybe hasn't been explored really in depth or.
That's interesting. I want to come back to this a little bit later, but how Raleigh can be better in some of those places. But we'll get there, I'm sure.
All right, one of our easiest questions to write. You are the head of the United Arts Council. What is the United Arts Council and what do you do?
The United Arts Council is a local designated arts agency for Wake County. We supply grant funding to nonprofit arts organizations across Wake County, individual artists and municipalities outside of Raleigh to produce cultural events. We also run one of the most robust artists in schools programs in the country. This year we'll put 415 professional teaching artist programs into Wake County Public Schools. Last year, it'll probably be over 250,000 student experiences in the arts this year.
Wow. What does it mean to be a designated agency?
So we partner with Wake County to serve. So Wake County doesn't have its own internal department for the arts. So we have a budget line item in the general operating budget to act on their behalf to support the cultural community. So this past year, Wake County provided $471,000 to United Arts. We put another 1.42 back in the community and covered our own overhead of about $500,000.
Wow.
And obviously you've been there going on 2 years now?
Almost, yeah.
And so you were not there at the beginning. Do you know a little bit about how long it's been in place? Or
How did they become the designated? Or is there more than one? This is a whole section of county government that I really have never given any consideration. Do we have a health department? We have all these other things. Why don't we have an arts department?
I don't think it's I think it depends on the size of your community, whether the county government tends to run its own department versus letting the individual municipalities kind of take the lead on that. So I do think a public-private partnership of this type is pretty common when you're, Wake County, we're 1.2 million, and that's grown exponentially in the last handful of years, right? So when this arrangement was started in 1990, the community was much smaller, and so it definitely made sense to kind of be on the forefront of a public-private partnership in that way. The organization was the merging of two other organizations, the Capital Arts Fund and Wake Arts. Wake Arts was running the Artists in Schools program. They were had an office in the same building as Wake Ed Partnership. The Capital Arts Fund had been working with the city of Raleigh, giving money, working with the state for the grassroots funding. Those two organizations merged together to make United Arts. And then that was when the process for becoming the local designated arts agency kind of went into place, when the two came together to support Raleigh and Wake County.
And so how does that play? Like, I know Raleigh has an arts department.
Yeah, beautiful one.
Yeah, so how does that play with the municipalities inside the county? I assume you work together on a lot of things, but
Oh, for sure.
Is Raleigh the only one?
No, Cary has its own department. Raleigh, it does an extremely impressive job with its arts. Sarah Powers over there leading that group is incredible. And I mean, just the amount of money granted, not even their own internal programming. The $5 per capita that they are granting out to nonprofit organizations in Raleigh is ahead of the game than most cities. They're killing it. Cary's doing a great job. They do a lot of programming. They have a lot of infrastructure. Wake Forest is doing a really great job. If you haven't been up to the Renaissance Center up there, it's really beautiful. And there's some new theater companies popping up, and they have a really lovely public art plan. And I know with some of these other municipalities, I mean, Fuquay-Varina, they have a beautiful municipal performing arts center, as well as Garner, and they've got the Halley and Apex. Some of them are, still playing catch up, and some of them are just, dipping their toes in having their own staff. And, we work to support all of the municipalities. We work to, it's a little bit, the way I look at it, if you think about, like Raleigh Arts is granting a significantly larger amount of money than we are. And so we kind of look at how do we create the incubator. So we tend to grant smaller organizations money earlier. I think for Raleigh Arts, you have to have a 3-year programmatic history, and we only require a 1-year programmatic history. We have started to work with organizations on identifying fiscal sponsors if they don't have their 501c3 yet, but can prove the other infrastructure pieces. So really trying to help the ecosystem bubble up so that there's space for new ideas to create and have a little seed money. And then also, we also support, Raleigh Little Theater. And we have a lot of great organizations that have been in this community for a long time. But we only fund organizations with budgets $2 million or less.
Okay.
The Artists in Schools program is one of the biggest things you do. Yeah. How did the artists get selected for that?
Yeah, it's and it's a cool process. It's an application process, and usually we try to start with conversations with artists first who are interested, so we can make sure that they're on the right track. We don't want anybody to put a lot of energy into something and then totally miss the mark, right? Our director of education, Julia Mastropalo, is incredible at working with the artist and the schools, and so we work with the artist. They supply an application where we ask for them to share their teaching materials for the classroom, for the teachers, for pre and post, identify their curriculum alignment, show a video sample of them in the classroom or on the performance stage, because controlling 1,000 kids in an auditorium on stage and commanding that space versus sitting in a room with 20 kids around a table, totally different. I'd probably be better at the first one than the second one, truthfully,
Sure.
So it's just two different skill sets. And then we work with the arts department at Wake County Public Schools, Jeremy Tucker and Bo Reese, and we usually identify some of our PTA parent volunteers and members of our staff to go through and kind of sit down and have a conversation and vet the programs. And then we decide, who's ready, who needs a little more work. In our strategic plan that we're about to roll out, we're going to be working on identifying ways to train up professional artists to become teaching artists. Because, that's just another way for an artist to have a revenue stream, and it's another way to support, just like, kids exposed to the arts become really great problem solvers, right? And that's like the workforce we want to have here.
Yeah, so you said 415?
415 Artists in Schools programs this year.
Wow, and so is that one per school? Is that every school?
It's not every school. Some schools do more than one, and then we've been working really hard. So one of the beauties, this program's 40 years old, which is why it is so strong. But also one of the beauties about it is that the strength is that it is rooted in the PTA, because parents are always going to do what's best for their kids, right? So that is why we've been able to do this for 40 years, is that we have these PTA partners, but also that's the greatest source of inequity, because when you look at high poverty schools, their PTAs aren't as active. So we've been working really hard to identify community partners over the last 2 years who can help us fund free programs in some of the under-resourced schools that need a little more support, which is part of our uptick this year. I mean, I think this year we're providing 34 free programs in high-poverty schools and many schools that didn't have programs previously. Like that's a goal, is to be in 100% of the elementary and middle schools. I would say right now we're like in like 82-ish% of them.
Okay. And who are some of the community partners you would work with for something like that?
Oh man, we had a great partnership this year with Empower All, which is a foundation for STEM education. Valencia Harris is the CEO, who we worked with to identify 2 free programs in STEAM, so teaching science and math through the arts. So we provided 2 free programs just with a partnership with Empower All. The 100 Women Who Give a Hoot identified $10,000 for us this year. We were able to provide 10 free programs, including bringing 3 free programs in addition to those 10. 3 programs, so 13 in total, to the Bridges program, which is the school for special needs kids that maybe need to come out of the mainstream classroom and kind of have a little extra support so then they can be reacclimated into the general education program. So those are a couple of things that we've been doing.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot or anything.
No, I wish
organizations that
big apologies
aren't
to
even on my
anybody.
radar. You know?
I hadn't. Well, I should introduce you to Valencia. You should hear what Empower All is doing. It's a lot of really cool stuff.
And without listing all 400 plus,
Yeah.
is there some? Can you tell us a couple that give us an idea of the range, or some of the, the most popular or just most interesting to you personally of the artists that are in schools?
Well, I just put out a newsletter today with an incredible article because a few years ago, 2018, we worked with Arts Access North Carolina to create some artists in schools programs that are specifically designed for students with disabilities. And so that was launched, and we also partner with 5 other artists who have experience in that work to create this program. That was launched in 2019. Then we went into a pandemic. And so this year we have 12 programs that are specifically designed for students with disabilities. So York Elementary School is one of those schools that this year is bringing 2 of those programs into their school so that the students in the classroom can work in the classroom. I mean, of course, the kids with IEPs and in the special education wing are invited to the school-wide assemblies, but sometimes that can trigger sensory issues or other.
Sure.
So to make it a more impactful and meaningful experience, and so that in a more controlled environment, bringing those programs into the classroom. So York is doing 2 programs that way this year, which I think is very cool.
And real quick, what's IEP? We try to be an acronym-free podcast. So
I'm sorry, I can't even.
Individual
education plan.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the I?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought I knew, but we like to.
We have to stay acronym-free. The rules are the rules.
Acronym-free, I love it.
Acronyms can sometimes make people feel like
you get a little carried away. You let one go. And
don't turn it off. No more. I promise, no more acronyms.
No. You say them because they come naturally, and then it's our job to ask what they mean.
Yeah. So I guess the Artists in Schools program has probably got its own sort of metrics around things. But thinking about the grant-making side of the organization, if you're talking about organizations that have 1 year of track record, essentially, and smaller than $2 million a year budget, I have to imagine there are some really good success stories, but there are also some stories of organizations that maybe fizzled out. Maybe they didn't work out. Like, how do you balance that? What does success look like from your standpoint in terms of where grants are made?
Yeah, one of my favorite grantees is HumSub. They produce a Diwali festival every year over at Coca Booth, and they have a few other artistic programs. They also run a teen leadership program now that is open to kids of all cultural backgrounds, not just young Indian people. And, they started very Carrie-centric. They are all volunteer-run. Their board is basically their staff. And so they make these huge events happen without a paid employee. And when I first I was like, how is that possible?
Really dedicated volunteers.
and then you meet their board, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool. This is incredible. And now you look at HumSub, and my last cup of coffee with them, they're like, okay, great. We've got Carrie in Morrisville and Raleigh. We're good. But can you help us have a presence in Garner and Fuquay and over on the east side? I'm like, yes, let's make some relationships. So that, I think, is a beautiful success story of, just investment in an idea. I can't really think of anybody that has fizzled out that comes right to mind. Obviously, people have challenges. United Arts does a great job under the watch of Reagan Carlisle in supporting the young organizations. Mm-hmm. So if you are under 7 years old, Reagan really nurtures their growth. So those leaders or board or whomever, they come and they sit and they meet with us, and they have a conversation every year. And we talk about needs, and we talk about professional development, and we talk about, challenges and opportunities. And how can we be a resource, not just with money, but with also our experience as arts professionals and helping kind of keep that going. So I think just having that openness, that kind of mind towards partnership versus just fundee helps give us a space where we can nurture those baby organizations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I was thinking more about, the sort of kind of somebody just started a new nonprofit sort of thing, but if
So usually by the time they get to us, because they do have their nonprofit status, and that is not something you can do in a year. Like that is, especially in post-pandemic, it's even longer now. Really? So, it's not necessarily that it's a brand new idea.
Yeah.
But we just have different levels of checkpoints, right? So if your budget is under $500,000, we required a accounting review, not a formal audit.
That makes sense.
It's just there's certain just structural pieces around trying to take down barriers of entry. It just expands, beyond, the big fine arts, which are wonderful to have, and we have them in riches here. But trying to get into some of those more avant-garde or culturally specific, smaller communities and creating support in that way.
You've used the word "we" a couple of times now. How many people do you have over at United Arts?
Right now there's 7 of us.
7 of you. Wow. Yeah. Okay. It sounds like you're very busy then.
Yes, it's small.
Yeah.
Small but mighty.
Yeah, that's great.
Lots of heart.
I'm curious, if I'm at the North Carolina Museum of Art and I like the art I'm seeing, I know where I am and who's putting it on and how to support them because I'm there, right? You guys put murals in different places. You put artists in schools. You have these other events. Is it a challenge to connect the feeling of someone saying, oh, that's a great mural, and brought to you by the United Arts Council? Or my kid came home and said they had this great program today, but how do you make sure
the struggle is real? It is so real because
what's the answer?
That's something that we're working on, and that's something that kind of in our new strategy moving forward will be, addressing. And it's stuff is okay, do we print 250,000 stickers to make sure that every kid goes home with a sticker, at the end of
Brought to you by.
Or do we, on the murals, we do have placards. Now, is everybody getting up close and personal with a mural that close? No. And and also some of the places that we're working really hard to make sure that there's an artistic presence in these smaller communities too, right? So we just put in these 3 gorgeous murals in Rollsville, which is right there, right? Like a hop, skip, and a jump. And I swear I was talking to somebody in the first question, and somebody who's been here for a long time, they're like, well, where's Rollsville? And I was like, oh, it's just over there, but...
Just call it's Wake Forest.
It's Wake Forest. I know.
We grew up when the high school had
It's Capital
Wake
Boulevard.
Forest, Roseville was one high school. So it was they must be close.
So it's very much, we are in the nooks and crannies, and we need to do a better job at telling our story for sure.
Well, when I was looking at your experience, having worked at specifically a theater in Atlanta, which again would more qualify as you're sitting in our theater watching our program here, so you know who we are, and then at Hilton Head would have been more akin to what you're doing now of we're putting arts around the town, but how do we make sure people know and appreciate when it comes time to allocate money? You love that mural. That was us. That's why this is. And
here's where you can support us.
Yeah. And have you learned?
Well, you can make a donation at unitedarts.org. But no, that's my job. I'm with you. It's hard, but it's hard.
And I'm not crazy to say is that divide between the arts that own their own physical space and arts that happen everywhere, or is it?
It's real.
Is it more that's true for all arts? Making people realize that you got to support these things?
That's a good question, actually. And I think that would depend on who you ask. I think there's probably, and I also think it might be a generational thing too. I hear in my head some artistic directors who, as I was coming out at, 28 and they were kind of heading off towards retirement at the older boomer side. And it was very much this mindset of well, no one knows we're here. And I'm no, people know, of course people know you're here.
We have a website.
Well, yeah. Exactly. In a front door. Yeah, exactly. So but I do think we do have an extra challenge of communicating what United Arts is, particularly as Wake County shifts and grows and changes, right? Because my guess, not having been here 40 years ago, but my guess is that 40 years ago, the brand was probably pretty strong because a lot of these other pieces hadn't quite bubbled up yet, right? So it was, but yeah, my mantra on Hilton Head when I first got there, especially because this was a new thing for them, was like, I'm not here to compete with any of the arts organizations. I'm here to support them. So I am happy to be in the background and lift you up. But yes, people do need to know that this is coming to you thanks of your town government or Wake County government or United Arts Council. So there is, I think, an extra layer of challenge in that space. It's also hard sometimes to explain what arts councils do, right? Yeah. And that the model too probably started out, 60 years ago at being very much strictly like just grant making. And then as schools started cutting arts programs, starting to support arts education, and then in Durham or Greensboro, they have buildings and performing spaces and festivals, and we don't do that. We prefer to grant the money to let other organizations put on the festivals. But it is definitely a model that varies based on community.
Interesting. And do you think that is related to the size of the community or just the historical nature of the relationship?
Yeah, I think it's just the historical nature of the relationship to what the need is. Too, when United Arts was started, there wasn't a municipal agency for the arts in any of these spaces. And now, as we said before, a number of them do have their own government agencies, which I think need to work hand in hand together. And I think we do actually do a great job in Wake County of that. I have seen other spaces where it becomes a little more competitive. I get it, but it's, I think for me, it's always been an all ships rise.
That's pretty cool.
What is Big Night In for the Arts?
Big Night In for the Arts is the best idea in the world, created by Charles Fanoff and continued by us. It is a partnership with WRAL, and we work with the Durham Arts Council, the Orange County Arts Commission, and the Chatham County Arts Council, along with United Arts of Wake County, to create a regional fundraiser for the arts. So this was born out of the pandemic. When people could not gather, WRAL stepped up and said, let's figure out how to raise money to keep these arts organizations from shuttering their doors. And we promote local artists, and they perform, they're interviewed, we bring them out in the community. Last year, once we got on the other side-ish of the pandemic, we added a watch party. We were at the Maton Inn in Cary last year. And then this year we'll be at the PSI Theater at the Durham Arts Council. 2 of our performances will be live, so be at that party. I know, it'll open up with a big Latin dance number. And then Trey Wellington, bluegrass artist Trey Wellington and friends will be closing out the show from the PSI. And then in between, we have Tift Merritt and Gabriel Getz. Who else? Pierce Freelon. It's a really great lineup this year.
How do you figure out who does what when you work with all those other
it's got to be
councils?
No comment. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. We work together really well. No, we all, there's 6 of us kind of on that steering team, two of us from United Arts, 2 women from Chatham, and then the directors of the Orange and Durham Arts Councils. And, we all just kind of throw a bunch of spaghetti on the wall at the beginning, and whatever sticks is kind of the direction we go. But we work with 2 really fantastic storytellers at WRAL, Don Ursich and Steve Elizondo, and they have been spearheading this project since 2021. Yep. They kill it. So
I know, Steve. I'm curious, Ashton and I grew up here, and so we're not sitting here. We're not sponsored by WRAL. We're not heaping praise on them for any undue reason. But if somebody came to me and was like, who would be a good corporate sponsor? I'd be like, well, at the top level, we're very lucky to have a local
Capital Broadcasting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in taking them out of it specifically, I mean, is that something that you feel like is a strength of yours? Is like how to figure out very quickly who are the partners that are most likely to be supportive and know what?
Yeah, I'm still learning for sure.
I feel like one of the smartest answers you gave, and I'll go back and listen to it later, was talking about one of the traditions that didn't come across. Obviously, the arts came into America, but as a ground-based civil support for them didn't quite transfer the same way. Now it's piecemeal together in different cities and places have it for the arts. But do you think you have like a strength for sniffing out like who are the governments and the private organizations that have both the money and the inclination to be quickly supportive of the arts?
I think that's the part of the job that's fun, right? Like, I call it treasure mapping, but it's research, and it's getting to like learn, like do a real deep dive on where you live. And, honestly, like I'm so freaking lucky because my career has been rooted in making my community the place that I want to live.
Sure.
Like how selfish but amazing is that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, but yeah, Capital Broadcasting, they're fantastic. PNC has been a huge corporate partner for Big Night In since the beginning. We've definitely got some people here that are willing to support this community, which is lovely.
How do you think, and I have a soapbox that anyone who will give me a chance has heard me talk about before, but that developing more corporate and foundational and philanthropic giving in this community, you mentioned Minneapolis and a few other places, and I think, Raleigh and the Southeast in general, Atlanta maybe a little bit different, but we don't have the same roots in wealth the way that a lot of New England, northeastern New England cities, even Midwestern cities do. And we have more tech companies, more biotech, those kinds of things here. So all of that leading to, do you think that Raleigh is in the triangle, the county, is a supportive place for the arts, supportive enough place of the arts, and or how do we make it better?
So I always think it can be better, and the way I think about it, like I'll just say this, like back it up to my time in Atlanta. I felt like in Atlanta, the arts community was so collaborative. Like we really did come together and work on like some kind of big vision things. It wasn't, like, mine, and then you get to Hilton Head where there's no corporate support, right? And it is a little bit, everybody's vying for the same 21% of people who will make a personal donation to the arts. I think that
then they can afford 22. Or no. You said 21 people. All 21 of them can afford.
I said 21%. 21% of people.
Is that specific to Hilton Head or is it a general stat?
That's if you look at any like giving, it's like going to be like church.
But the ones in Hilton Head, at least they all can afford one more, right?
Oh, for sure.
The question is just, can
Which
you convince
one?
them that it's worth it?
And then you have, and so that too is a little bit, so you say, someone said this to me actually not too long ago. Because I was talking about kind of just like some of the similarities and differences, right? Like I love Raleigh because I have all of the wonderful cultural and education things that I had in Atlanta, but I can get around so much easier, and it doesn't take me 42 minutes to go 8 miles and usually. But I do think, there is some history. So anyway, so I was saying in Atlanta, very much corporations that were locally based were very supportive. And I would credit Mayor Maynard Jackson and Mayor Shirley Franklin, and I would credit Ingrid Saunders-Jones, who headed up the Koch Foundation for many decades, and being influencers and kind of establishing that as the culture. Because they were people in positions of power who said, these are things that we value. And then that was how it continued to translate. For decades, Bell South was a huge supporter of the arts, and then AT&T bought Bell South. And it was very much like, well, we're not going to support the arts. And then very quickly they learned like, oh, no, actually we do have to support the arts. And Turner Broadcasting was always a huge supporter, right? Because what do they want? I was working at a theater company. They want good storytellers, right? So you have Turner then was bought by Time Warner. So Time Warner bought Turner and AT&T in the same year. At the theater company, I was actually getting money from AT&T, Turner Broadcasting, and Time Warner. We were the only theater company getting New York-based money from them at the time. And December 23rd, I got a call from the woman who headed up the foundation, Betsy at Turner, and was like, hey, stop your grant application for next year. I'm sending you a document. I need it signed and notarized before close of business today, but we're just going to send you your grant for 3 years. We're going to do 3 years of funding. We're sending you a grant for $100K for 3 years of funding. I was like,
because things are about to change.
I was like, yeah, because everything's changing in 9 days. And she's like, yes. It's like, got it.
That's a good partner.
So like, but just having that as where her head went, right? It's like, oh, okay, we don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to go ahead and get some contracts signed real quick so that we don't, so that these organizations that have been getting, we were a $2 million theater company. $25,000 is a big amount of money.
Sure.
And so, I do. I think there's room for growth here in that conversation. And I think I think it's, partially a little bit at the state level. If people are going to get big tax incentives, then we need to establish what our culture for our community is. And one of the draws for Wake County particularly is good public schools. It's a nice place to live because we have things to do, like the arts. And so, like, valuing how the arts play a role in who we are as a community, I just think that we can be talking about it a little more, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So,
Wow, I completely agree. And I think especially around incentives packages and things like that, I mean, I kind of equate it to a good neighborhood with an HOA or, something like that. Like, you don't get to appreciate all of the good things without contributing in some way. And there's an argument that maybe that's what your tax dollars are. But from a corporate perspective, there should, I think, be a responsibility to do more. We do have a lot of organizations who do a lot.
We have a lot of organizations that do a lot.
Would love to see more people stepping up to the plate so that as the economic situations change, as the banking sector changes, we are not nearly as tied to the fortunes of those.
And I think, too, some of it's just a little bit of how we, how do we do that economic development recruitment? Because the arts are a tool in economic development. I mean, the arts, just here in Wake County, the arts for the state are a $2.3 billion industry. Here in Wake County, we're almost $550 million of that. So we're like 25%. And so why, like in Georgia, right? We were talking about the hundreds of billions of dollars they're making on film. And I started my career in Atlanta when that committee got together to go and fight for those tax incentives to steal the business away from North Carolina and Louisiana.
I was like, let's not get political.
It sure made it easy.
We helped send it your way, I feel like.
But then so like 2005, and then you look at, a couple governors later, and it took Governor Deal to say, like, why is the Arts Council just floating over here by itself? It needs to be one of the 4 pillars of our economic development. And then it was like, okay, great. So now we've got the Georgia Council for the Arts, not just, doing grants and, but now they're like part of hosting international companies to come. And it's like, oh, well, we've got people coming from Tokyo. We need to have a private tour at the High Museum with some cocktails. And, I don't know. It's just a different way to think about it, I think, where it's just a little more holistic for the entire community.
Oh, I like that.
Obviously, not everything is perfect for every community, so not everything that's perfect for Atlanta would be perfect for Raleigh. But based not only there, but your experiences throughout the country or the world, what's the first thing that comes to mind that's Raleigh's missing that we could and should have?
So I don't think that it's anything that's missing. I think Raleigh does an incredible job. I mean, you think about things like Hopscotch and the Bluegrass Festival and, the African American Cultural Festival. And, we do great things here. We have, the opera and the symphony. we have it all. I just think that there's an opportunity to create greater resources to augment the professionalism of it, right? So, I spent a good chunk of my career happenstance in professional theater. So, like, how we compensate our actors or our theater tech production people, or, are we on union contracts? Like, that's silly, like, internal nitty-gritty behind the scenes stuff, but those are things that kind of create a slightly heightened level of professionalism within a very tiny fragment of the cultural sector. I think one of the things Raleigh does freaking awesome is its public art. I think there's something everywhere, really, and that's been a great initiative of the city of Raleigh. The town of Cary's been killing it. The town of Wake Forest have been killing it. So, like, it's just, I just want more. I just want more art all the time.
I love that. And if you were to separate the arts, and maybe in your travels and things like that, is there anything just as a citizen of Raleigh that you would like to see? Anything that feels like missing?
I don't know. Honestly, like, we really, my husband and I are also just like total, just like junkies, just like music junkies, movie junkies, theater junkies, all the things. We're just like addicted to all the things that are good for your brain. and a few other things that are bad.
You can always
I'm just
just,
kidding.
you can always just say gondola. That's a
Gondola. We need a gondola.
system.
We need a gondola
That's
system.
Now we're at a whole
we'll
system?
figure that
Gosh.
one.
Okay.
We'll start with one line, but then we're.
I mean,
we're
but
into it.
transit or different things like that. People
Oh,
sometimes feel
mean,
like we should have
Yeah,
more
I don't wanna
music
get
opportunities, more music venues we've heard before.
Some people would say a baseball team.
Yeah.
I wouldn't,
Some
but I'm
people,
just
yeah.
I'm just
Do
throwing
you know what I really do? The one thing I
Throwing out all
actually
kinds of
do
things.
miss from Atlanta,
is.
the Atlanta United, the MLS team.
Yeah.
I had no idea, man. That was so cool being there when they launched that.
In that stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it
yeah, I mean,
does.
the Benz is fine, but it's like, honestly, that first season when they were playing at the Georgia Tech football, like, man, it doesn't get more ATL than that. That was cool. But I'm not pitching that we have an MLS team, but that's the
Now
one
we've
thing
got
I
the
do
courage.
miss.
So.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think, Raleigh's, what I love so desperately around this place is that there is opportunity. I don't ever think I'm going to like fall asleep and like all of a sudden like my husband and I aren't going to be able to like have a job or our kids are going to like have like some terrible school experience. Like that's just like not my experience here. It is easy to get around, which was the reason that we left Atlanta, is that it became too difficult to be a mom and be a professional. And, I mean, like I just think everyone's so nice and like it's like we have opportunity, but like nobody's like, we're not living in the rat race. Like, I don't even know how that is possible, but it's incredible. So everybody should want to be Raleigh.
I mean, we agree with that.
It's good perspective.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so focusing back on the arts and thinking about the area, if you could wave a magic wand and change one policy thing, what would it be?
My thing that I don't know that I'll accomplish in my lifetime, but that I do, it would be like a dedicated funding stream for the arts. Cumberland County has one. It was something put into place like 20 years ago, but there's a bunch of weird laws in North Carolina that I haven't wrapped my brain around yet.
Yeah. You could probably
plus-
just end that with there's a lot of weird laws in North Carolina.
And politics in America are just a constant ebb and flow, right? So, but yeah, I mean, if there was some way that we could cut off a penny for the arts, like that would be such a game changer for Wake County.
And then just a total hypothetical. If you had taken over like a 80 to 90-year-old theater in Raleigh that had mostly been a movie theater, but now was kind of, the doors were open. You seem like a very, what would you do with it?
Oh my gosh.
Completely hypothetically.
Oh my gosh.
You can charge him a consulting fee if you want.
I don't know. I'll be at your charitable screening for the Coffee Friends next week, but
yes.
or 2 weeks from now.
It's filling up.
But no, I mean, I think you're killing it. Everybody knows you're killing it.
That was an unserious
I know,
question. It was
I know.
more like, man, this is the person that I probably should.
I mean, I'm happy. I love talking about venue stuff.
I should read that chapter in your book or whatever. I'm always just trying.
I
to
look forward to
learn
writing that
things,
book one day. I'll never do it. I totally have adult ADD.
What do you do for fun? Do you still sing or perform?
Oh my gosh, I started singing with the Oak City Voices this year, so I'm doing a little choral singing.
Okay.
I just started singing. Actually, I started singing back on Hilton Head for the first time in a handful of years. So that I got the bug again.
What kind of music is Oak City Voices?
It's a female choral song. It's SSAA choral singing.
Yeah. How many people?
I think there's 30.
Sorry, that
I think
sounded
there's
like an acronym.
sorry, soprano,
soprano, two
alto,
alto.
soprano, one
Okay.
soprano, two alto, one alto, two.
Yeah, four-part
female voices.
Just maybe
Sorry.
Thank you.
acronyms.
Sorry.
I guess that was technically an acronym, but like, yeah.
This is only my second concert with
more
them,
like
so I
music.
don't want to put them in a box and tell you what kind of what their musical thing is.
Yeah.
But I think it's 30 women right now, and they are lovely, and it's been fun to go.
Is it a cappella?
No. There's a Martha is the accompanist, and Rusty McKinley is the artistic director and conductor.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I joke because singing gives you endorphins, right? So it's like it's the end of Legally Blonde. It's like, and happy people don't murder their husbands. But we love hiking. We're out in the woods all the time. We like being up in the mountains, getting on the trails, traveling now again, thankfully.
Do you have a favorite mountain spot?
Do we have a favorite mountain spot? Back when I lived in Greensboro, we were on Hanging Rock. We were on Hanging Rock really frequently. We head up to that kind of Blowing Rock, Boone area just because it's an easy drive.
Yep.
We also love on the other side, Silva, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like the vibe there a lot. really anywhere. We'll just, we've got so many great parks and trails around here too. I mean, we're at Lake Jordan like every random teacher workday, because what better place to be, right?
Yeah.
So you've mentioned Big Night In for the Arts.
Yes.
We can obviously go to the website, check things out. Are there opportunities for people to engage with United Arts in a different way? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, we're always looking for volunteer support. We don't do a ton of events, but we do need people on occasion to be in places for us. And we also, you definitely can make a donation and, help us spread the word. We've got our e-news sign up is pretty easy. We only send it out twice a month, if that.
And what will I learn in your e-news?
Well, this week you learned about our specifically designed for students with disabilities program.
Cool.
And you learned that we got a $50,000 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Congrats.
To go to our Community Spotlight program, which is a grant-making program for arts events for nonprofits that focus on historically underrepresented communities. What else did you learn? You learned that our other grant portals were open and the talent lineup for Big Night In for the Arts. Lots of fun stuff.
That's a good one. And for only twice a month, that's pretty good. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah,
this has been really lovely.
This is fun.
Thanks so much. Appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks for listening to Podcast Raleigh. Review us on your favorite podcast app. If you like this episode, share it with a friend.